In a sleepy town outside Charleston, South Carolina, the local mailman paused at the Henderson mailbox. He had just delivered a letter that would change the course of a wealthy family's future. Inside that weathered southern mansion, 82-year-old Eleanor Henderson was sipping chamomile tea when her world tilted. Her grandson Nathaniel, whom she had raised like a son, called her useless during Sunday brunch. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She smiled. Because Eleanor Henderson had a plan. A plan that involved lace doilies, her late husband's war medals, and Nathaniel's beautiful ex-girlfriend, Amber Green. The same girl Nathaniel dumped for being too boring. What Nathaniel didn't know was that Eleanor had kept every letter Amber ever wrote to her. And what the world didn't know, Eleanor was worth $14 million in stock options, old art, and land nobody thought had value. What followed was a quiet, explosive war, fought not with fists but wills, charity galas, bitter glances, and secret pie recipes. Welcome to the tale of how a grandmother's silent vengeance rewrote her legacy and shook an entitled boy's entire world. Sunday brunch at the Henderson estate was no small affair. Every week, the sprawling oak-lined driveway saw a parade of sleek luxury cars, all gathering under the moss-draped trees that led to the grand double-porched house Eleanor had lived in for over 60 years. Inside, the dining room glistened with sunlight spilling through tall windows, illuminating an heirloom table that could seat 18. That day, however, it only seated 7, the inner circle. Eleanor sat at the head in her usual sky-blue dress, hair curled, pearls strung tightly around her neck. She greeted each guest with a soft nod, her southern manners never slipping. Nathaniel arrived last, late as always, wearing joggers and a tech startup hoodie. He barely kissed her cheek before sitting and flipping through his phone. The meal started politely enough. Roast chicken, mini quiches, lemon scones. Talk of politics, weather, and real estate drifted between bites. Until Eleanor asked, "And what are you working on now, Nathaniel?" Still with, what was it? Clickbox. He didn't look up. Sold my shares. Starting something new. NFT-backed real estate leases. You wouldn't get it, Grandma. She smiled gently. Try me. That was when he scoffed. A long, sharp laugh. Honestly, Grandma, what do you even do anymore? Just old. Useless, really. Utter silence fell. Forks froze. Glasses clinked awkwardly. Even the dog under the table went still. Eleanor felt the blood rush from her face, but her hands never shook. She dabbed her lips with her linen napkin and replied softly, "Then I suppose it's time I got useful again." No one understood what she meant, but they would. Oh, they would. That evening, Eleanor climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, her hand trailing along the wooden rail polished by decades of use. The attic smelled of lavender sachets and cedarwood. Dust motes danced in the golden light filtering through a single round window. In the far corner sat an old cedar chest. Inside, nestled among photo albums, lace handkerchiefs, and her wedding veil, were bundles of letters tied with lilac ribbon. Letters from Amber Green. Amber had been Nathaniel's high school sweetheart, a quiet, bookish girl with a laugh like wind chimes and a heart full of dreams. Eleanor had adored her. They'd shared teas, talked about books, and exchanged recipes. Amber wrote Eleanor letters, even after Nathaniel broke things off. Eleanor untied the ribbon and began to read, one by one. The ink was slightly faded, but Amber's words were vivid. She spoke of her ambitions to open a literacy center for underserved kids, her heartbreak over Nathaniel's cruelty, her gratitude for Eleanor's kindness. One letter ended, "Even if I wasn't the right one for your grandson, I hope I was the right kind of person for you." Eleanor clutched the letter to her chest. "You were, darling. You were." That night she didn't sleep. He planned. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the Charleston offices of Smart & LaGrange, a tall colonial building with iron balconies and ivy creeping up its brick walls. Mrs. Lillian Smart was waiting for her, already pouring 2 cups of black coffee. "You look like a woman on a mission," she said. "I am," Eleanor replied. "And it begins today." For 2 hours they drafted a new will. Eleanor's previous beneficiaries, Nathaniel and his 2 cousins, were removed entirely. Her art collection, family estate, shares in Henderson Timber, and her late husband's war memorabilia were now designated for Amber Green. Additionally, they created a living trust to fund a foundation in Amber's name, supporting literacy, young women entrepreneurs, and even pet rescue shelters. Lillian raised an eyebrow. "This will cause waves. Let it drown them," Eleanor said, sipping her coffee. Later that week, Eleanor called Amber. The young woman was stunned but agreed to meet. They met at a garden cafe. Amber, older now, wore confidence like a scarf. Graceful, mature, but still kind-eyed. "I know this is sudden," Eleanor said gently. "But I never forgot you. And I never stopped believing in you." Amber teared up. "I don't even know what to say." "Then just say yes, darling. To everything." Amber nodded slowly. "Yes." And just like that, Eleanor's legacy took a new turn, one Nathaniel would never see coming. The annual Henderson Foundation Gala had always been the jewel of Charleston's high society calendar. White-gloved servers, ice sculptures shaped like swans, and a silent auction featuring everything from vintage wine to vacation homes. Everyone wanted to be seen there. This year, Eleanor made sure it would be remembered forever. She arrived in a deep emerald gown, walking arm in arm with Amber Green, whose elegant black dress and quiet poise turned heads the moment they entered. Whispers followed them like shadows. Nathaniel, seated near the front, nearly choked on his cocktail. His new girlfriend, a bronze-tanned Instagram model named Tawny, barely concealed her sneer. Eleanor took the stage just before the main course. She tapped the mic gently, drawing the crowd to silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear. "As many of you know, the Henderson Foundation has long supported local arts and education. This year, however, we're making a bold change." Gasps followed her next sentence. "We're donating $2 million to the Amber Green Initiative, an organization dedicated to literacy, mentorship, and sheltering abandoned pets." The spotlight landed on Amber, who stood blinking, visibly moved. The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Nathaniel turned red. When he tried to speak to Eleanor afterward, she held up a hand. "This is Amber's night. You had yours, and you squandered it." The local news carried the story for days. Charleston hadn't seen such a spectacle since the mayor's dog ran for office. In the weeks that followed, Nathaniel tried everything. Calls, texts, even showing up uninvited with flowers. Eleanor never raised her voice. She served tea instead. "You've made your opinions of me quite clear," she'd say. "Now I'm simply returning the favor, with action." He screamed. She offered lemon cake. He cried. She suggested he volunteer at Amber's new shelter. Eventually, Nathaniel brought lawyers. He claimed mental instability, suggested coercion, demanded a revision of the will. Eleanor, ever prepared, had documented every conversation. Video. Witnesses. The tantrum he threw at brunch. Captured on camera by a cousin who uploaded it, thinking it was funny. It went viral. "Grandma gets burned by tech bro grandson." The headlines wrote themselves. Still, Eleanor never lost her calm. She invited close friends for afternoon tea. She hosted knitting circles. She taught Amber how to make her late husband's favorite pie. Each stitch, each recipe, each sip of tea was another chapter in her silent, righteous war. Amber wasn't the same shy girl who once wrote Eleanor letters. With the inheritance trust and newfound public support, she launched the Amber Green Initiative full scale. She opened a literacy center in downtown Charleston, renovated a rundown orphanage into a vibrant group home, and built an app that connected senior citizens with volunteers for companionship. She didn't brag. It simply worked. One night, she posted a video reading bedtime stories to seniors in nursing homes. The video went viral. Comments flooded in. "She's the granddaughter we all wish we had." Eleanor made the right choice. Even national outlets picked up the story. Amber was interviewed by NPR, featured on a late-night show, and invited to speak at a women's empowerment summit. When asked about Eleanor, she said, "She didn't just leave me a fortune, she left me faith in myself." Nathaniel watched from the sidelines as Amber rose. Every headline was a slap, every applause a reminder of what he'd thrown away. And Eleanor, she simply smiled from her porch. By now, the story had left Charleston and gone national. A local paper's headline, "Grandson calls grandma useless, she leaves fortune to his ex," had been picked up by major outlets. Soon, Eleanor Henderson became a symbol of unexpected justice. Talk shows debated the story. Radio hosts chuckled over Nathaniel's audacity. Amber appeared on Good Morning America. She was poised, gracious, and radiated sincerity. When asked why she thought Eleanor had chosen her, she said, "Because she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. She gave me more than money, she gave me courage." The internet erupted in support. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Team Eleanor, hashtag Grandma Knows Best, hashtag Amberizing. A documentary crew reached out to Eleanor. She declined the first 3. On the 4th request, she agreed, on the condition that it would focus on mentorship, legacy, and second chances. The final cut was titled, Letters from Amber, A Southern Legacy. It premiered at the Charleston Film Festival. Eleanor attended in a vintage floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She received a standing ovation. Nathaniel watched from his apartment, alone. Nathaniel's downfall wasn't loud at first. His startup crumbled after investors pulled out, citing reputational risks. His girlfriend Tawny left after a PR disaster involving her mocking elderly people on TikTok. Broke and bitter, Nathaniel moved back into a rental condo. He attempted to sue Eleanor, claiming mental coercion, but the court tossed it out. Too much evidence of Eleanor's clarity, and of Nathaniel's contempt. He turned to YouTube, posting rants titled, "My Grandma Betrayed Me," and "Amber is a Fraud." The videos flopped. Comments mocked him mercilessly. One night, after yet another failed attempt to sell a crypto course, Nathaniel stood in front of a mirror and whispered, "I should have just said sorry." But Eleanor didn't want his apology anymore. She wanted peace. Eleanor's health began to fade slowly, like the gentle closing of a flower. But she was never alone. Amber was there every day, reading poetry, cooking her favorite stews, brushing her silver hair gently. They laughed over old photos, played card games, watched sunsets from the porch swing. One morning, Eleanor asked, "Do you remember the lemon pie recipe?" Amber nodded. "I memorized it." Eleanor smiled. "Then you're ready." That evening, she asked Amber to read her one last letter, the first one Amber had ever sent her. When it ended, Eleanor squeezed her hand. "My darling girl," she whispered, "make them remember you were loved." Those were her last words. She passed away in her sleep, peaceful, proud, and absolutely unforgettable. It was a gray morning when the Henderson family gathered at Smart and LaGrange for the reading of Eleanor's will. Mahogany walls, brass fixtures, and the solemn silence of legacy filled the room. Nathaniel arrived late, wearing a forced smirk and an ill-fitting blazer. Amber sat near the front, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wasn't here for money. She was here for closure. Mrs. Lillian Smart opened the envelope. "To my grandson Nathaniel," she read aloud, "I leave the painting of the hydrangeas that hung in my bedroom. May it remind you of what withers when neglected." Few gasps, some snickers. "And to Amber Green," Lillian continued, "I leave my home, my stocks, and all remaining assets, including the preservation of the Henderson name through her leadership." Nathaniel jumped to his feet. "This is a joke." Lillian calmly handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a photo of Eleanor and Amber on the porch, smiling. On the back, Eleanor had written, "You chose pride over family. I chose love over blood." Nathaniel left the office without another word. Amber cried quietly. and the room applauded. With the estate in her name, Amber transformed the Henderson mansion into a community hub. The gardens became gathering spots for artists and writers. The ballroom hosted poetry readings and youth concerts. The attic, a writing studio open to foster teens. Every room breathed purpose. Amber renamed the mansion the Eleanor House. Scholarship was launched. A pie contest was held annually in Eleanor's memory. Each year, the prize was handed out by one of her former friends, now all admirers of Amber. Nathaniel, meanwhile, vanished from public life. Some said he moved to Arizona. Others claimed he was living off YouTube ad revenue. No one really knew. No one really asked. What people remembered was Eleanor Henderson, her grace, her steel spine, and her final act of poetic justice. Years later, Amber stood on stage at a national women's conference. The crowd waited as she held up a single letter, the one she wrote Eleanor at 19. "She saw me," Amber said, voice trembling. "When I felt invisible, when I thought I had failed, Eleanor didn't just leave me her fortune. She left me her faith." The audience rose to their feet in tears and thunderous applause. Back in Charleston, the Eleanor House was bustling with new ideas, young voices, and fresh starts. On the front porch hung a plaque, in loving memory of Eleanor Henderson, who proved that legacy isn't built by blood, but by boldness. Did you feel Eleanor's quiet strength? Would you do what she did? Or would you forgive Nathaniel? Tell us in the comments below. Tap that like button if you believe respect has no age limit. Hit subscribe for more true style senior stories with drama, heart, and justice. And share this with anyone who ever underestimated a grandma. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's made of T letters and $1 billion smile.